Hi everyone, Dave here. Thanks for coming along to another episode of the podcast. Now there's a bit of a break from players this week, speaking to someone different, so I hope you enjoy it. We have Jon Cotterill-Bolsover on the podcast with us. Now he's had a really interesting route into football after leaving his job in HR to go into data analysis. He currently works with the Chesterfield FC Women setup and also with the Chagos Islands. So anyone that remembers my chat with Rick from Hope and Glory Sportswear, it was Jon who set up the shirt deal initially with Hope and Glory, hence why we've ended up getting him on the podcast. But it was really good to have a chat with him about the ins and outs of analysing data in football and also in strength and conditioning too. So if you're part of a Sunday League team and want to get into a bit of data analysis, this is the podcast for you. Hopefully it answers a few questions of what people working in data analysis and S&C coaches do. So I think it was really interesting chat, and I could have spoken to him for hours. As always, we are at Spire Legends on Twitter, Legends of the Spire on Facebook, and also Spire Legends on Instagram now as well. So thanks very much for listening to another episode of the podcast. Here we are with our latest episode with Jon Cotterill-Bolsover. Yeah, it's really good to have a chat with you because obviously I've done a lot of podcasts with footballers for the men's team at Chesterfield of years gone by. And then we had that chat with Hope and Glory Sportswear, of which that all became about because of you, I think. So we'll cover that. Because really the women's team has really grown, hasn't it? Massively over the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's they're really pushing on now. I joined them 3 years ago. And we kind of, that's when we put a development plan together for them, and we've been pretty relentless with it, really. I took some time out of my business that I ran at the time. I thought I'm going to take a year off and I'm going to grow it to what it is. Still a lot of work to do, but yeah, they're coming on in leaps and bounds, to be honest.
Right. So we'll dig into that in a bit. But first, I just wanted to know about your kind of love of sport from growing up and how you wanted to get into it, who you kind of supported and stuff like that growing up.
I might drop myself in it if I let on that I'm a Blade. So I am a Sheffield United fan, born and bred. Grew up at the side of the ground, so it was kind of always part of my culture, if you like. So I was one of those football mad kids. There was a group of friends that we lived in blocks of flats with a field in the middle. And we literally came home, threw the school bags in, and we were out until we got shouted in for supper. So that was kind of my football life growing up, if you like, and obviously growing up quite close to the ground as well. You got the roars and the crowds and the coaches and people arriving and stuff like that. It was it's always been football for me. Although I was sports mad at school as well.
Was it ever a career option for you? Did you ever think when you were growing up?
When I was at school, I was determined to be a sports journalist because I was particularly good at English. That was my subject at school, and I had a real passion for media. And so I was absolutely dead set on being a sports journalist. But I didn't quite get the GCSEs to get onto the A level, so it was that career kind of went down the pan a bit. So it's certainly very different to what I thought it would be.
Yeah. So how did you end up getting into it eventually?
Well, it's quite a story, to be honest. When I was younger, it was back in 2006 that I kind of got into coaching. Basically, I was taken ill with a kidney infection. And then I ended up in hospital with it, and I was kind of in hospital, and they said, "Oh, you're having a heart attack," and I was sort of like, "Really? I don't feel like I'm having a heart attack. I've got no signs of a heart attack." And it turned out, to cut a long story short, I was taken into a room a few weeks later, and a cardiologist said to me, "You've got a rare genetic heart disorder called sudden unexpected death syndrome, which means you could die any second." So I was sort of like, wow, okay. I'm not sure how to deal with that one.
Right, it's cold, isn't it?
It was at the time, and so basically I had to have a defibrillator, pacemaker fitted, and be monitored and all that kind of thing. But it was quite a big thing at the time because the heart condition is called Brugada syndrome. It was so rare that I hit the national press. And it was a bit of a whirlwind. It seems like a bit of a dream when I look back now. I was in all the national papers and they want me on television and all that kind of thing. But kind of once that dust had settled, I was sort of left with this, wow, what now? And it was at that moment I kind of decided that I was going to dedicate the rest of my life to improving the lives of other people. So that's what I want to do with my life. And no matter how much time I've got left, that's the legacy I want to leave. And I did that in two ways. Number one, I became my wife and I became foster carers and adoptive carers, and and the second part of that is I wanted to turn my love for sport, my passion for sport, football in particular, into a career, whatever that might look like. So I wanted to go out and help people, and that was the medium that I was going to use. So I remember my first course. I was actually sat on a course. It wasn't even a qualification. It was part of the Olympic Legacy Program, something called a Sports Maker Program. You got a free T-shirt, and you went on a 3-hour course. And basically, the point of the course was you went out and made sport happen, whether it was with mates in a park playing rounders or doing table tennis on your kitchen table and that type of thing. And then 15 years here, I found myself. It was kind of just went on a long run from that point. So. Quite a dramatic transition into the fair.
So, in a way, you're almost quite thankful that all happened but looking back, because it looks like it's given you a real like tunnel focus determination from it.
Absolutely, I always said that the heart condition, serious as it was perhaps the best thing that ever happened to me. Obviously, I've got a wonderful wife, got a wonderful family, I've got kids and grandkids as well. But I was in a dead end job. I was a HR manager. I was kind of hiring and firing people for a living for a call center, and it was awful. Really, it was just a run of the mill, pay the bills job. And I thought, no, there's more to life than this. And so having a heart condition, like I said, was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was life changing in a bad but then a wonderful way as well. So
yeah, wow. And yeah, I think you've done quite a bit of like youth coaching as well, haven't you? With kids and things that I've seen, because I've had a look at your LinkedIn. And like, there's a lot on there about courses that you've done in like mental health and challenging behaviour and safeguarding and things like that in kind of youth coaching, youth sport.
Yeah.
Do you want to say a word about how important you think all that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the two parts of my life have intertwined. So working as a foster carer, and my wife works in that industry anyway. We've got a lot of knowledge on that subject, and it crosses really well into sport. So, and particularly with mental health, it's such a big part of what we do now, and such a big part of life. The way that we view mental health and conditions and circumstances has changed, or the understanding has changed so much in the last 5 years almost, that the knowledge is not out there. So, and I think when you look at kind of, for football coaches as an example, you're turning up, you could be a volunteer football coach, turn up to your football club and you think my skills are to coach football. Actually, we're finding more and more there's a lot more around that now. So it's dealing with challenging behaviour, dealing with mental health issues and all that type of thing. So getting the knowledge out there is so essential, and such a big part of what we do now.
So if we go on to, so obviously you at Chesterfield Women and Chagos Islands, which we'll talk about as well, you're working in kind of data analysis and performance and things like that. So I'm just wondering, like, a nuts and bolts of what it is.
Yeah, so performance analysis, it's perhaps what it says on the tin, really. It analyses performance in various ways. So the simplest way of thinking about it is that I particularly work in 3 different ways. So I work on video analysis. So we use video and that to look at, to create codes of data. So that might be, at its most basic, might be having a look at what happens when you enter the attacking third, or what happens when the opposition enter your defensive third, or what happens on a set play and things like that. So you can look at the video is very good, but you can look at examples and patterns and things like that. The second part is what I'd call notational analysis, which has evolved probably more than anything in the last few years or so. And notational analysis is basically you're at the side of the pitch counting things that happen. It's at its most basic, it's pen and paper, but we obviously these days we use software and iPads and things like that, and that will capture data as in things such as we've had a percentage of the ball, or we might have had from the 33 attacking entries we've had 12 shots, of which 42% were on target, and with that you can start to, over a period of time, start to identify patterns. And that might inform training and things like that. Or it could even inform within the game. It can inform what you might do, the changes that you might make, and that type of thing. And perhaps the most advanced part is the GPS analysis that I do as well. So that's where you see the vests and things like that. So the GPS vest that we use can give me information on a player for every millisecond that they're on a pitch or in a game or training. And that give me things such as movement, acceleration times, peak acceleration, top speeds, distance moved, work rate, and that really informs kind of your strength and conditioning programs and things like that. So you would create an S&C program on the back of the GPS data that you get. So obviously I work on a bit of a higher level, but analysis is coming into the game at all levels now, and there's some really good stuff out there for the amateur coach as well, whether that's just pen and paper or a very basic Android phone app that you can use. So it's such a huge part of what we're doing, and probably the biggest growing part of coaching football that we see now.
How much of it is like about the team, and how much of it is about the individual? Obviously, there's a big overlap, won't there? But there's kind of two elements of it, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. So S&C wise, if I was working with GPS, I might look at team data. This is what we need to do as a team. But actually, as individuals, if I'm designing a program, perhaps for one of my under-16s, then I can look very specifically at what type of program they might need, the types of things they might need to be doing outside of football to take them that one step, that 1% higher. So it informs team training that this is what I might concentrate on over the next 6 weeks or the next block. But from an individual perspective, it's what you can do to advance that particular person. But it's also great for looking for things like injury prevention. When you see somebody's stats kind of change and you notice that pattern, you think, why is that happening? Is it about fatigue? Is it about overload and things like that? And so actually, we find the injury prevention side of it as well is very good as well. So probably a 50-50 split between team and individual. Yeah.
And how do you benchmark that at the start? Because obviously everyone's different, aren't they? The heart rate might be slightly different, and the perceived efforts or whatever might be slightly different. And obviously there's positional differences as well. Some have to run more than others. Do you have to benchmark all of that at the start depending on who they are and where they're playing?
Yeah, so you're talking about what you don't use analysis for, which is the first lesson you ever learn in performance analysis. It's not used as a stick to beat players. It's used as, how do I progress that person, or how do I progress that team? And so kind of when you're working with the data, you always need baselines. So for instance, when I also work with our under-16 side, which is it's kind of semi-academy, if you like. We kind of they kind of train 3-4 days a week. So with those, we have periodic fitness tests, for instance. So we'll do kind of a sprint test. We'll do a height test. A vertical jump test. We will do a number of other tests as well. And we'll probably do that 5 times during the season, because that will give me every piece of data that I need on that individual and monitor progression as well. Which is great because it's consistent and you can measure that the same conditions over time. In games, it's a little bit different because, like you say, it depends on your opposition, depends on the weather, depends on the pitch, it depends on your position. But generally, what you're looking for is analysis, and data that you take from analysis is not there to answer questions. It's there to ask questions more than anything. So, for instance, I can have a look at our under 16s and say, right, this week their GPS rate dropped by 20 points. Why was that? Okay, so we have a look. Was it about the game? Was it about certain periods of the game? Was it? And it will ask lots of questions, and then you come to a conclusion on those questions, and that will inform your next steps. So it's never as easy just to say, all right, our accelerations were down this week. You've got to do some sprint training. You've got to take analysis is one small tool in a very big box, and you will use that to inform your coaching and your training more than kind of it being a very defined area. So it's kind of when I work with our first team and we'll travel down and we'll finish the game at 4:00, then that's when my work starts. So it's often I'll probably do 15 hours work after a match to put reports together and to really dig down into the data to present and so the real work is kind of outside of football as well. So but we've had some fun with that.
I bet you have. Have you found anything out about a player that they didn't know about? Because I'm thinking like was it Lizzie Arnold who was like put through loads of assessments about what sports she might be good at, and they kind of looked at all of her data and said, oh, you'd be good at skeleton, and she went on, I think it was skeleton, went on to win gold medals. Is there things like that you can tell from people's data that they're actually better than they think they are?
It's I mean, you can always sometimes if you dig right down into the depths of how a person works, I can improve people's speed now by not giving them kind of strength programs, but by changing the way that they move. So adjusting their biomechanics, the way that they run and the way that they move their arms, their energy expenditure and that type of thing. I can improve people's speed just by changing the way they are. Now, it's funny that you should mention kind of skeleton and things like that, because British bobsleigh, actually, the vast majority of their recruitment comes from athletics. Most people in bobsleigh will have come from athletics, and so they have a profile of, we need people who have good explosive movements, a fast peak acceleration, a high top speed, and so definitely they will select from other sports because they fit the profile. A few years ago, I met a lady called Amy Williams. She was a gold medalist at the I can't remember which Winter Olympics it was. It was going back some time now. And she talked us through the stories. She was a sprinter, and she was a 110-meter hurdler, and she was picked up through that program. That they were actively looking for those people that had the right skills. And you imagine hurdling and sprinting is exactly what you need on a bobsleigh. You need to run fast and then jump into the sleigh type thing. So profiling. And when you take that to go to your original question, when you take that to football, definitely you tend to find that people would be better suited to new positions because they have the attributes. For instance, I've turned wingers into wing backs because their endurance over a long distance is very good. Their acceleration is very high, and their top speed and their speed maintenance is very high. Every attribute of a wing back, and so they've done that very successfully. So absolutely, you can look at those attributes. Yeah.
And I suppose one of the most important things of your job is that people actually listen to you. You know, you need a manager, don't you, that will listen to you if you say, "Oh, they're going to get injured, rest them," and you need players to listen to you if you're saying, "No, you should be a wing back and not a centre forward."
Yeah. It's one skill that you do learn is that you give your opinion and it's one of many opinions. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it will be listened to, sometimes it won't be listened to. Sometimes you can do 15 hours of work and somebody say, I'll have a look at that later, and it not happen, and you think, oh, right, okay. But that's just the way that that the game is, or the role is, and you have to think and act like it's a science, it's a sports science, and you have to think and act like that. Your job is to provide information. It's not your job to kind of ensure that information is followed through unless that's needed. But you give the information, and then it gives people like managers, for instance, it gives them more options to kind of produce their own opinions. And it may be they disagree with you, and that's fine. Okay, you kind of welcome that to a certain extent. You want to be challenged as well, but you inform decisions. It's kind of whether they follow that through, it is their prerogative really. But you know that you've done everything that you can to give them the best informed choice. So
how could like a Sunday League team start doing some kind of data analysis? What could they practically do if they've not got much of a budget or something like that? What could they
do? Pen and paper. It's the best thing we have. So you could just sit doing kind of the just lines on a piece of paper and say, okay, what happens when we go into our attacking third? What happens when the ball comes into our defending third? And so somebody sat on the sideline, piece of paper, counting. So we've been into the opposition box 24 times. We've got 10 shots. 4 of those were on target, 6 were off target. Very, very basic stat. How would I use that? It might be shooting practice. They might say, well, actually, we've dominated this game and we've won 2-0. But actually, when we look at it, if we'd have been a little bit more accurate with the shots, it may have been 3-4, 5-0. And even though we dominated this game, if it was a bit tighter, it might be those fine margins that just give us that edge later on. And the thing about kind of the way that we are as humans, if you like, we're going to psychology a little bit, is that we have a bit of a bias. And sometimes we find what we're looking for and say, well, actually, we've dominated that game. How come we've not scored? But actually, you need to look at why, and data gives us that. So it kind of removes the bias. So your very basics is pen and paper. Just record how many times things happen. What happens when they go in our box? 10% of the time they lost possession. 90% of the time they got a shot away. So let's work on that defensive thing to stop the shot happening. Very basic stuff that you can take. And say it's free of charge. It's 50 pence. You can pick yourself a pencil up and get a nice little notepad, and you've got everything that you need.
So on that piece of paper, would you be putting boxes, shot on target, shot off target, and just so you can just do a mark in it, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. So you set what you call KPIs. So you set KPIs and you think, if the ball goes into the box, what are all the outcomes that could happen? Okay, what are all the possible outcomes? And you might say shot on target, shot off target, set play, offside, foul for, foul against. And you can have and every time something happens, it's a little mark. Simple as that. And you can and it's amazing what you can do with that data. It's the most basic data you can have. But it's amazing because you can sit down afterwards, and I've seen it many a time where people sat down and said, didn't realise we were doing that. We didn't realise we were doing these things. We're scoring off 60% of the set plays. I didn't realise it was that good. So let's enhance that. What's not working for us? What can we improve? It's very basic data, but actually really powerful as well.
Yeah, I was talking to John Duncan the other day, and he was saying the basics of how he managed was that he wanted to make sure over a season we scored more goals from set pieces than we conceded from set pieces. And he was like, that'd be a successful season.
Yeah, that'd be a very successful season, yeah.
So do you sometimes sit amongst fans during a match and they're saying things that you think, no, that's not right? Kind of touched on that sometimes fans see things, like you say, they've got bias towards what they see and what they don't see. Do you, as an analyst,
as an analyst, I try to sit as far away from people as possible, because you have to be very careful because everybody's influenced, and somebody might be shouting or saying something, and I've got to be very careful that doesn't bias my data. So I'm suddenly looking and thinking, "Oh, I didn't spot that," and then you start looking for it to happen as opposed to it not happening. So there's a lot of confirmation bias goes on. So you've got to be very disciplined in that sense. And you do sometimes, you get the good old if people don't understand analysis, they'll say, I hope you're counting how many throw-ins we've lost. It's sort of like, no, that's not in my KPIs, so I'm not actually counting that. Well, it must be a lot. It must be a high percentage. I'm not counting that. And so you've got to be very careful about biased information. Like I say, it is a very scientific aspect to it. But you also get the other side of things where you will have managers and coaches that will absolutely adamant that your data's wrong. So I used to have that in the old days when it was very, very new. They're sort of like, that's not true. That can't be possible. That's not happened. And it was sort of like, yeah, that's the stats. That's the beauty of data, is that it is data and data doesn't lie. So no, I don't believe that. So you do get that. You do get that. And it is. You do have to be very disciplined. It is tough.
Yeah. Well, you have the benefit, I suppose, of I know rather than I think, don't you? Which is important.
Absolutely. It's not my opinion. It's what it is.
So how did it all come about with the Chesterfield women's team then?
So it was very basically, I've got quite high standards, which is I need to be at a club that is progressing and has got a very professional background. It's one of my downfalls, to be fair. But I got talking. I was out of the game for a little bit. I was looking at a new club. Spoke to Chesterfield. Went to see what they were all about, and I was so blown away by the setup they had for the level they were at the time, that it was a no-brainer for me. So I kind of came in. They were very into what we're doing. When I spoke to Mike, who was the first team manager at the time, he bought into exactly what I wanted to do. The pros and cons about it. It was the first time I was putting GPS analysis into. So I invested quite heavily into GPS data because I knew it was an up and coming thing. And so the club that I went to had to be right, and it had to take it for what it was. And so I went there. The setup was unbelievable. For the level they were at, to have the physio. I mean, the physio at Chesterfield Women, who's been there ever since I've been there, is one of the best physios I've ever worked with. And there was a psychologist there, there was a fitness coach there, there was the goalkeeping coach, absolutely brilliant. The setup was superb, and I thought, yeah, this is for me, and never looked back since, really.
Yeah, I'd probably admit to being a bit ignorant for the last few years, in that I probably knew that they existed, but I didn't really see anything around about them. But then this last year or so, it's gone astronomical in many ways. You know, with kind of through social media and everything else, and you kind of see the results, that they're getting great results, and you see players going on to other clubs and things like that, and the reputation rising. It's a lot's happened, hasn't it, in quite a short space of time?
It has, and it's been a huge project, really. And it's sometimes we've got a wonderful board, an absolutely fantastic board that work tirelessly, and bear in mind it's voluntary as well. And there was weeks we put 60, 70-hour weeks into taking the club to where it is today. And there's a lot more work to do. We set the standards high, we set the bar high, and we said, and it was up to us to drive that. And that's what we've done from the work that's been done at the top with the first team. The first team have gone through a phenomenal process of rising through the ranks, and are already in a new season, in step 5. And the work that we've done with the juniors as well, as that's grown fantastically. For the first time, really, now we've got juniors that we're looking at 14 and saying they're first teamers. They're going to be first teamers one day. And the plans that we now put in through, we have things like the Advanced Player Centre, which is basically for players in the club that they have strength and conditioning programs, they go on seminars. We gave them the high level, kind of professional academy level advice, information and opportunities. And that's now showing results, producing people that will be playing for the first team one day. And it's a tough first team to play for. We have some people that could quite easily play at the top of the game, and they choose to stay with us, which says a lot about what we do. But the work off the field as well has been absolutely brilliant. We've got some really good people at the club, some very, very good professionals that do such a wonderful job. And we couldn't be where we are without the hard work and dedication that they put into it.
Yeah. How much is it actually incorporated into the men's part of the club? Is it just via kind of name and association at the moment, or is there more of a closer link?
Yeah, so we've enjoyed a close relationship with the club over the past few years. There's Chesterfield FC Women, as it is now, has a long history, and in fact, when you look at the history, we're one of the pioneers of women's football. We had the lady, if we go right back to when it kind of all started 30 years ago, obviously it's a 30-year anniversary this year, we had one of the coaches, Jane Ebbish, was the first woman in the world who applied for and passed her UEFA A license, or what it is now, and the players that came through. And there was that association with the club back then. I think they came from being Charlie Park, and then came Charlie Park Spirates and the Chesterfield Ladies, and that's evolved over time. And we are associated with the club closer now than we've ever been. And to be fair, the fans at Chesterfield have really embraced it as well. We see now we get people who go to the men's game on a Saturday, they come to the women's game on a Sunday, and we've got people that come. The crowds are never going to be as big as the men's. It's just where women's football is at the minute. But we see that crossover now, perhaps more than we've ever seen before. And the fans have been superb. They give us a lot of support, and it's great to see that kind of crossover. Yeah. And we enjoy that. We enjoy that kind of relationship that we have with them. Yeah.
And it's worth mentioning you're vice chairman as well, aren't you now? So
I have many roles.
Got any other duties in a job description? I am vice chairman at the club. I think my actual title is head of performance and development, but I'm also the safeguarding welfare officer as well. I think I also sweep the changing rooms, make the tea, and that type of thing. So yeah, I do have many roles at the club, but I have the luxury of time, so so I have time to put into projects and things like that. So and I love every minute of it, to be honest. So yeah, but I am a very busy man. You've caught me for an hour this morning, and that's quite rare at the minute, particularly this time of year. So how far can the team, like say the step 5, say at the moment?
Yeah.
How far can we go?
So the next ambition is National League. So this is when you step out of regionals and go nationwide. So step 4 is the National League. So that's our next target. My ambition is endless. I think we can go all the way. You only have to look at some of the other teams, and money will always be a factor. The financial side will always be a factor. To go to the Super League, you need millions of pounds. There's no doubt about that. But I wouldn't like to set a limit on where we can go, because anything can be achieved, anything can be done, and it's one goal that I have. I want to take this club. I want to be part of the group. I want to take this club as high as it can go. So we've got some immediate targets, but can it go to the top? I'd never say no. It'd be tough, but we'd never say no. But over the next few years, I'd like to see us get into the National League, and I'd like to see teams such as Forest and Derby coming to players, and New Stoke Cities and teams like that. So and that's a real possibility. So I can't kind of predict. It would be against my analyst nature to predict how we're going to go on this season, so I have to be very careful on that. But the ambition of the club is high. It's very high, and I think we could go pretty high. Yeah.
And final thing on the Chesterfield FC women's team is those kits.
Yeah.
So that caused a bit of a stir, didn't it, when those kits came out?
Yeah, the thing is, what we wanted to do, it was a 30-year anniversary, and we thought we've got to do something special. We want to mark that, because we've had the history of Chesterfield Ladies as it was is so rich, and there's been so many good things, and there's the stories and things that we never want to lose. And so the way that we design the kit, so I mean, obviously our new Hope and Glory, as you talked about last week through Chagos Islands, when we designed the kits, we designed the home kit to be a relic of the past. So the kit itself, if you look at the first kit that Chesterfield ladies ever wore, and it is knocking about there somewhere, it was kind of one that was borrowed from the men's team through community back in the early 90s. We've replicated that kit through the home kit. The green kit is a look to the future. So it was something a little bit different, something a little bit out there, the green and gold, which I think which has been very, very popular. And of course, they're made out of recycled bottles, which is another thing about looking to the future and where we want to go as a club and things like that. So they've been incredibly popular. And the wonderful thing we've done is it's not just the first team that wear those; they go right down to the juniors. So all the juniors are pulling on the same kit. It's the same special one-off hand designed kits that the first team are doing. So we've got kind of 10-year-old Lacey pulling on her shirt the same as we've got kind of Sammy Stokes in the first team doing. So it's and that's brilliant to see. That's really good to see, and they've been very popular. And to be fair, I introduced them, but one of our board members, Sadie, she kind of did a lot of work for the designing, and what a job she's done. Do you know what I mean? Because they've gone down a treat. I've not kind of put one on to go down the pub yet, but you know what I mean? They are those types of shirts, aren't they, that you could do that. So
we'll go down to Bramall Lane in maybe.
I'm not sure I'll do that, to be honest.
So you mentioned Chagos Islands. So I was kind of reading into them a little bit because the history of the islands is quite traumatic, really. They basically, you'll be able to probably explain it more than me, but the basic gist of it I got was that the residents of the island were kind of turfed out so that they could build a military base there.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the islanders have been there. It's an ex-slave colony. It was people were taken there from Africa and India. So it's very Afro-Indian. The Chagos Islands basically come under a group of islands that include the Seychelles and Mauritius. So technically, legally, without getting into too much depth, they belong to Mauritius, and they were always part of Mauritius. But an island in their own rights. And there's many islands that make up the Chagos, but there's kind of 3 or 4 main islands. The main one being Diego Garcia. So basically in the 60s, there was a deal done, and it was kind of an under the table deal with the British government and the Mauritian government, that Mauritius were allowed to have independence from Britain on the basis that they gave the islands to Britain. And so it was done in such a way that was unlawful in international law, and the islanders were removed, but on the basis that the pictures to the rest of the world is that there was no natives, there was no native islanders there, and so they were forced off the islands through some horrific kind of measures. The medical care was stopped, the food supplies were stopped, the ships were stopped from coming in, so people couldn't live a life there. And the worst, I think that the biggest thing is they passed a new law that no one was allowed a pet on the island. So they rounded out everybody's dogs and killed them, basically. And it was to push the people off the island. So they'd offer trips to the mainland, to Mauritius, on boats. And then as soon as they arrived in Mauritius, they say, you're not allowed back. And it got to the point where they had to leave. And they've had a terrible time with Chagosians now for since the late 60s, and I found it when I came across the story. It's absolutely heartbreaking. I thought it's 2021, and we've got people who still have been kicked off their island, still living in poverty. We've got people living in this country that can't get a passport or any citizenship, and I think, wow, it's absolutely terrible. It's a real crime. The case went to an international court, which found that the British had to give the islands back, because they basically leased it to the Americans, and it's the Americans that built a naval base there. But the British have ignored the court rulings, and there's not much that can be done about it. So it's an ongoing fight. But the Chagosians are so resilient, and there's not many of them left, to be honest. There's a good, I'd say probably 3,000 to 5,000, and obviously over time, kind of that changes a little bit because people lose their identity and they live in other countries and things like that. But they're such a wonderful people to be with, and football has been a brilliant way to keep their culture alive, and that's why I got involved with that particular team. It's tough, but they're so resilient. It's wonderful.
So where are all the players? Are they just scattered around the world?
Yeah, so basically about 50% of them are in Mauritius. So they were sent to Mauritius, but they're still to this day living in slums. So it's without electric or water or things like that. Very difficult to get jobs and education. The other 50% found their way to Crawley, oddly enough. So basically they got on the flight, were at Gatwick Airport, and just lived in Gatwick Airport for a few weeks until the council at Crawley gave them somewhere to live and things like that. So there's a real density of population in between Crawley and Mauritius. There is some Chagosians around the world, such as in Russia, and there's some in Manchester as well. There's a small Chagosian community in Manchester as well. So, but yeah, the mainly in the UK, they're mainly based in Crawley.
Yeah. And this is where CONIFA comes in, isn't it? Because that's the Confederation of Independent Football Associations, which is basically anyone that's can't be in FIFA, not in FIFA, because of like politics that's maybe happening or things like that. And I followed the World Cup when they had the World Cup last time, and it was really joyous to see everyone representing their nations that are a lot of nations that people won't have heard of.
Absolutely, and it's kind of I often think of it as kind of the non-league of international football. Like you say, there's nations you've never heard of, or some nations that you have heard of. You kind of look at Jersey, for instance, are in there, and Sicily have joined very recently, and teams like that. But yeah, it's a brilliant celebration of culture, and we lose culture, don't we? And when you get kind of when there's a state that's not recognised, or a state that's not known, or it's a very small ancient state, I find it absolutely fascinating that these cultures scattered all around the world, and the CONIFA World Cup is a real celebration of that. And when I joined the islands, we qualified for the it was a 2020 CONIFA World Cup in North Macedonia, but it got cancelled because of COVID. So we worked really hard for that, and it was such a shame that couldn't happen. But I was really excited to kind of go and play. I think we were playing Somaliland, and I think Kazakhstan were in there as well, and teams like that. So I've got to North Macedonia. I'd never go to North Macedonia for a holiday or passing through. So I was so looking forward to that. I think that's what makes CONIFA great. Is the spirit of football is perhaps at the centre of everything for that, and it's a wonderful being part of the Chagos and CONIFA and the World Unity Football Association as well is another association that Chagos are part of. And you get to meet some wonderful people.
Yeah. So what's the plans then going forward? When's the next World Cup?
So the next World Cup hasn't been announced as yet. There is an Africa Cup. And of course, Chagos is an African nation, technically. So I don't know. I'm kind of waiting to hear if there's a trip to Zanzibar on the cards in October, November. So I've been dusting off the old passport. So we never know if we've qualified for that or not. But the World Cups tend to happen every 2 to 3 years. So it's not like FIFA where it's every 4 years and it's stuck on that. They do tend to be a little bit sooner. So it's kind of just wait, and it's very different. It's not like FIFA where you play qualifying games and go through. They work on a point system, so it's about playing games. So you'll rack up points for playing games. So the more games you play, the more points you get, whether you win, lose, or draw, and that's what gets you into the tournament. So it's about being active as opposed to winning matches. So it's a little bit different. So yeah, lots of I think before I joined and Chagos went into the last World Cup, I think the manager Jimmy he was organising games left, right, and centre. It was sort of like, I've got to get 15 games in the next month to qualify. So he did a wonderful job doing that.
Crikey. Yeah, well, it sounds like you've really got everything that you're involved with. All sounds really fun. Is that what it feels like to you?
No, absolutely. I love it. It's like I say, it goes back to 15 years ago. I wanted to make a difference to people's lives, and sport was the way that I've done that, and I'm not disappointed. Working with Chagos and Chesterfield has been brilliant. I love every waking minute of doing that, and it's I work with the University of Sheffield Women now as well, so that's another team. So yeah, my time fills up very, very quickly. But yeah, I work with so many people in so many different ways, and it's wonderful. And you'd like to try and make a difference to those people and take it to the next level and give them professionalism and give them a platform they might not have otherwise had. And if I'm a small cog in that and that works, then I'll be absolutely delighted. So, and yeah, absolutely love it, every minute of it.
I bet you really miss HR.
HR, I can't even spell it these days. I miss it that much.
My kind of last question was going to be, so we've obviously had a lot of lockdown over the last year, and a lot of people have been working from home and stuff like that. And I, like many other people, have piled on a few pounds over the past year. And I have run a few marathons and things in the past. So I used to have a really good max VO2 kind of rating, but I don't anymore. So what if people had like 20 minutes a day to do some like S&C type stuff, what can you do with 20 minutes a day to get fit?
Yeah, so what we did in lockdown, where I was working with the junior teams, and we did something called a 30-day challenge, which was all about HIIT workouts, so high intensity interval training. You can dedicate 15 to 20 minutes a day doing certain exercises. And there's so many out there on YouTube, or you can Google HIIT, HIIT, or Tabata exercises. 15-minute exercises, high intensity. So it might be 3 sets of 15 times 4, or it might be you do 1 minute on, 20 seconds off type stuff. And let me tell you, when you start doing those, your fitness goes through the roof. And you only need, you don't even have to do it every day. You could do 15 minutes 3 times a week, and I guarantee you will get results. Do you know what I mean? I'm sounding like Mr. Motivator now, but I guarantee that you will get results. Have a look for HIIT workouts. And if you do them to the best of your ability, there's a lot of plyometric work in there, which means basically lots of jumping. So you're kind of doing different types of jumps. So they might be doing a bit of upper body, then straight into a lower body, straight into a cardio. And all you need is 15 minutes, even twice a week, 2-3 times a week. And I guarantee you'll be walking faster, you'll be running faster. And the first 2 weeks are like a living hell, where you think, I cannot do another day of this. And when I kind of did it for our juniors, the wonderful side of that, we had about 47 juniors doing the 30-day challenge. And every day they had to do this and they had to record themselves. All the parents did it as well, because the parents were in lockdown. And some people who not exercised for 20 years, they were doing it. And suddenly they were like, wow, I'm a different person. It was wonderful. So definitely the HIIT and Tabata workouts, get on them. You know what I mean? There's so many resources out there, and it doesn't have to be. I do the work I do is sports specific. I strengthen and condition people for football, for sports, for football specific movements. But if you're just out there wanting to do anything, do the HIIT workouts. Honestly, I cannot sing their praises enough.
Joe Wicks of the North.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not quite as popular, good looking, or as fit as Joe Wicks. So yeah.
Right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I suppose the message from you then is for everyone to go out there and follow what the Chesterfield FC women's team and Chagos Islands are doing. Then, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. They're both very active on social media. There's some really exciting things happening. So yeah, give us a follow, give us a shout. We'll always get back to you. But the Chesterfield women play at the Chesterfield Rugby Club on Dunstan Road. So and our league's on a Sunday. So yeah, get yourself up, come and support. If you bought a new shirt, we need to see you in your new shirts, because they've been selling like hotcakes. So yeah, get yourself up, come and have a look.